also planning on talking a little bit about my plans for a future series that I plan on doing on this video. So, but I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about fantasy books. And why is that, you might ask? Well, because I only read one type of book, almost at least, and that is fantasy. I love fantasy books, and since I learned to read, I almost only read fantasy books. I enjoy them so much. I think in the beginning, when I was young, why I started reading them was because I had like a very strong imagination. I could really put myself into the books, and had a very easy time imagining all the things that the book talked about, and the pictures and so on. So I was planning on talking about fantasy books in general, and also a little bit about these three specific, since they are three fantasy books that I enjoy, or rather enjoyed more than others. I really like them, but I can start off just talking a little bit about Aragon. This book, I think, is internationally known. It also, as you can see here on the front, it's a picture with real life, real people, and the picture is actually from the movie that, or there was a movie made from the book, but only one. This book series has 4 books, and they only made one movie for the first book, but to be honest, the movie was horrible, and it kinda it was really bad actually for being a movie, and often that is the case when you make a movie out of a book. But I think that movie took the cake. It was so bad, or at least I remember it like that. It was a long time since I saw the film. But the books are so good. I think the author that wrote Aragon, he was very young when he started. I think he released the first book when he was 15 or 16, which is amazing. That's very impressive. But you also notice that the first book it says, but in Sweden he was 15 years old when he started writing. And that's of course very impressive. But I would also say that the first book is like a cliche. It's a very common fantasy theme, and how the storytelling is and so on. But that is only the case for the first book, I think. You can really notice throughout the series of his books was really impressed by that actually, since I think the Eragon, or now I can't remember what the series is called. Yeah, the series, at least, it's very impressive, since the story gets like more, since the book has twists. That was what I was gonna say. I think fantasy books in general are like pretty easy reads. It's not like very complicated, or they don't have twists or like weird connections, stuff like that. Some do, maybe more adult fantasy books that focus on like more complex things. But I think Christopher Paolini, as he's called, did that great, because the book can be read as a young or a younger teen, but has some very nice and interesting twists and turns throughout the series and the books. And it's extremely, like, I think, good writing and very many interesting concepts as a fantasy. One big part is the world has magic, but you can only cast spells or magic spells that you can physically complete as you are, like your physical being. If you can like lift a rock, you should be able to lift a rock physically, because if you use a magic spell that lifts a bigger rock than you can physically, you die. I think that's what happens. And I thought that was kind of like an interesting concept. It's not necessarily unique, but he goes very deep in how the magic in this world works, which I think it's nice, since in many fantasy books they don't necessarily like explore all the fantasy stuff and why some things are the way they are. So I actually enjoy that, and he has like a very clear structure and idea how he wants some concepts in the book, how they work and so on, like magic. But yeah, I recommend it. It was actually planned to be a trilogy, like only 3 books. First, here on the back, it actually says trilogy, but in Swedish. But this book came out like way earlier than when he finished the series, because it actually ended up as a series with 4 books. I don't know exactly what happened, if he couldn't finish the books in 4, and I mean in 3 books, or that he maybe the last book became so long that he chose to make it into 2. I remember, I don't know if it was between the first book or the second book, or it was between the second and third book, but there was a very long pause. And that, I remember it was, I remember I was waiting so long to get this, to read the next book, but it took years, so I almost forgot it. But then one day, when I was in a bookstore, I saw the next book on the shelf, and I was like, what the hell? this. So I bought the book and read it, and I was blown away. I think the period there we went where it took some years to like continue writing and complete the book, I at least saw a massive shift in how we wrote the books. I think they improved like vastly. So it actually might have been between the first and the second, third or fourth book. I'm not sure though, but I think he improved greatly. Okay, next book. This is actually like one of the more recent fantasy books. It's also a series called Throne of Glass, and this one I'm actually reading in English. I started to read most of my books in English, or at least those books that the author wrote in English. It's a book made of Sarah J. Maas. I think she is English, yeah, New York native. It was a series that got recommended by me, by a friend, and I think it's great. I would also argue that it's a fantasy book that is written for more of an adult, more adult readers, because it has adult themes like sex or whatever, but it can be quite violent. But I would also argue that not only because of the adult themes, but it has some kind of complicated emotional stuff. I think she does a great job of writing, at least in my opinion. I'm not a book review, or I would never claim myself to be some good book reviewer, or I have a lot of knowledge on books. I read a very small and niched stuff, since I only read fantasy. I can't compare this fantasy book against this crime or detective book, because I only read fantasy. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert reviewer or something like that. So these things are just my opinion. But I think she writes characters very well, and the main character is a girl, and I think she writes her very well, and her complicated feelings that she goes through in this series. I haven't actually finished this series, because when I started reading it, all the books hadn't been released yet, or she was writing the last or second last one. I think she has released all of them now, and I think I have all of them. It might be that I am missing the last one. So right now I am rereading the series to see how, just to remember, it's quite a lot of characters, and not overly many characters, so it's hard to keep up. But I'm kind of bad at names, and it happens quite a lot of things throughout the books, so I wouldn't be able to just pick up the new book and remember, since it was a year, or maybe a little bit of less, a break between when it's great. I think this book also have like kinda like twists and very like, oh man, discoveries, like whoa, didn't expect this, or damn, that's kind of cool, or things like that. So I appreciate it. I think fantasy don't always have that, but I think she does that very well. I recommend this series. I'm recommending all the books that I'm showing, like, because they are my three of my favorites. So it's maybe not that weird, but it's great. It's quite a lot of books in this series. Can't remember. The main series, I think, have like 6 or 7 books, and it has a prequel as well. But yeah, it's great. I love it. I'm excited to finish it now that I have the books and all the books are released. So I think I just finished the 3rd book, so I'm gonna start on the 4th one. Yeah, great book. And the next book is actually one of my favorite books. I would say that this is my favorite book series. The one thing that maybe not makes it as good now, but I think it is still good. But this book is written to young teenagers. So the story is quite simple, and it's not very complicated or intricate, but in its simplicity, I actually think it's like an awesome written book. I read this book many years ago when I was a young teenager. The author is Line Kapperol. I think she is Danish. So since I live in Sweden, they often had a lot of Swedish and Danish authors, and she was, at least when I was young, kind of famous for these but very well written fantasy books for young teenagers. And since I loved all fantasy books, I thought, hey, why not? Let's look at it. So I think I started reading this series and I loved it. I remember I was like, damn, these are really, really good. So I blasted through the series. It has 4 books. Skämmerskans dotter is Swedish for the shamer's daughter. Because, and that's kind of weird title. Skämmerskans is a word that isn't commonly used in Sweden, and in English it's the shamers. So I think and the title is because there is a woman and her daughter as well. They have an ability to, when they look into someone's eyes, they can make the people or the one they are looking into their eyes, they can make them feel shame for stuff maybe bad stuff they made, or stuff they actually feel shame for, but maybe locked away the feeling of shame. Maybe because they've made a lot of bad stuff, that's why the book is called The Shamer's Daughter, because the book is actually about the daughter and her story. I think this book is great. I own the whole series as well. It's 4 books, and while, as I said, it's quite a simple story, and so I think it's very well written, and it's still like such a treat. It's really an adventure, and also in a sense it's interesting. This main character, her struggle with this ability, or her her ability to make people feel shame, since many people avoid her because of her ability. She can't make many friends, and how she struggles with accepting her ability and so on. And I think that's kind of interesting how her and that struggle, because when you think about it, that's like an horrible ability to have. Not, it's good because you can make people feel shame for like bad stuff they did against other people, but also nobody would be able to look you in the eyes, because and that is very like prevalent in the book. Everybody feels shame for things they have done. It can be small things, but still, when because they have the ability to force shame, or it's not really about forcing, but more that they are making people realize what they've done, and then they feel shame about it. Or at least in my opinion, it doesn't really is about forcing people to feel shame, but it's a realization that is a shame. But I don't know, it might be that they only force it out. It's a good book. They actually made a movie out of this book as well. I didn't know that actually. I've never seen it. And I think when I looked it up, they've made 2 movies. Might be good, might be bad. It's hard with films that are made out of books, because books, they have so much details and like storytelling and parts that you can't fit into like a 2-hour long movie. So if you are like a really big fan of a book, you might like some movies just because you're a fan, and you get to see the book get life, maybe. Not always true. It kind of makes me sad to look at this book with the movie cast, because I really think the movie was bad. I might actually want to switch out that book, because this is like a pocket book, but the others I have in like bound books, so I can blame it on that. I want all the books bound or something like that, so I don't get to see this one front or like this picture, because it makes me sad that such a good book became such a bad movie. Oh well, I'm not gonna complain. It was interesting to see at least what they made of it. Yes, and I want to finish this video by talking a little bit about a future series that I'm gonna make. Because today I was actually not planning on talking about fantasy books, but instead read like the first chapter or the first part of The Great Gatsby. I'm planning to read I want to read like stories for you guys. I enjoy when people read for me. Or maybe not any longer since I'm older, but when I was younger I enjoyed it. And I enjoy ASMR because when people talk to me when I'm going to sleep or whatever, when I'm relaxing. So I think I wanted to read a little bit. But I didn't, because you can't read any book. However, you need to read books that are like public domain, that is owned by the public on YouTube. It can't be copyrighted. So first I thought about The Great Gatsby, since it just entered that public domain this year actually. But it wasn't really what I wanted. It wasn't really the story I wanted to read. I haven't personally read that book. I've seen the movie, and I think the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio is great. I think it's very good, and it's very flashy. But I think, or at least I didn't really want to read that type of book. I wanted something that I can like read shorter stories for you guys, almost like reading a fairy tale for you, like a good night story. Might sound silly. You might be older and think that you're too old for fairy tales, but I think there can be a relaxation in that as well. So I actually decided that no, I'm not going to read The Great Gatsby. I'm going to read fairy tales. So I've ordered a book that is like a collection of the Brother Grimm's fairy tales. I think most people have heard about the Brother Grimm's. Those they were two German brothers that have gathered mostly German like fairy tales and folk tales, I think it's called. I don't know. So I'm planning on, when getting that book, either it's like next week or the week after that, I plan on making a video where I read a story from that book and record it and show it to you guys, because it's like a collection of stories, and I hope they are like shorter stories so I can make one video about one story. I hope you will enjoy that, and I was calling it a series because I want to have that like as a consistent series on my channel, since I like being read too, and I think maybe some people miss it as I do, or maybe they didn't get they didn't have anyone that read to them when they were little, because my parents read books for me like for a very long time when we were going to sleep. My dad and he read like the whole Potter series for me, and I thought that was awesome. It was, I remember it fondly, so that's why I want to make something like that for other people. Yeah, that is my plan for the future series. I don't know how often, I'm gonna make a video about that. It might be like every other week or something like that, a video, since I want to keep doing random stuff and talk about random stuff as well. But we'll see what I do. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Me rambling about all these fantasy book I love. And why I love fantasy so much. I mean, sometimes I might be like, damn, you might be a little bit crazy about fantasy. Yeah, I should try out some other books. And to be fair, I have. But I don't enjoy them as much as fantasy. Do you guys have any special genre you enjoy in books? That is always, or both that, but I'm also interested in, do you have a favorite genre, and what is your favorite book? Oh, I'm sorry, I need to tell this story as well, because one time when I took a religion course at a university here in Sweden. I had a classmate, a girl, and I thought her genre of books which she read the most, I thought that was kind of funny. She said her favorite genre was American classics. And I thought that was very specific. I understand maybe if you are an American, but as a Swedish person saying to someone that I only read American classics was kind of uncommon. I don't want to say it's weird, because I really don't think it is, but it was just very uncommon. It's not something you hear very often. But the funny thing is, when she said that, my first thought that popped into my head was, damn, she sounds really smart. Those are the kind of books that you read at school, that you get assignments to read, and you do that on your own accord. Damn, that's impressive. So I thought that was kind of funny, and a very specific genre to read. But I used to thought of that story and or that thing, and I just remember so strongly that I thought that she was smart, and I was like, damn, that's very cool. But yeah,